And I'm asking, have trade unions had their day? Now, fears are growing that union action on the railways might be the biggest in modern history. Now, there's obviously the threat of the strike during the Jubilee, and it will bring the UK pretty much to a standstill, including empty shelves in supermarkets and petrol pumps running dry. They have so much power, don't they, really? So to combat this, Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, has said that the government is poised to draw up laws which require minimum numbers of rail staff to work during a strike. Critics say, though, that the government are now trying to shift the blame of the cost of living crisis onto the unions. So should unions be able to hold the government to ransom? Is planning the largest strike in history during a cost of living crisis really the best option for the unions? So, for this debate, what do you think? Have the trade unions had their day? I'm joined now by political strategist and former Director of Political Operations to Tony Blair, John McTernan. John, thank you so much for joining me. Now, I'm going to start with, obviously, the fact that unions, they've been a big thing in employment for many years. Yeah. It's been, you know, are they still, in your views, fit for purpose?
Definitely, because it's clear, all the historical evidence and the current evidence shows you that being a member of a union is worth nearly 10% on your pay. When you compare jobs, qualifications, sector by sector, union membership pays off massively for the members of the unions. So people get a fairer deal in their pay if they're a member of a union. So we still need them. Public sector workers definitely still need them, with inflation reaching 10% and then being offered 1% by the government. It's just an insult.
Well, could it not be that there's not much of an alternative, isn't it? Because if you, otherwise you're sort of exposed. What are the other options if you don't join the union?
If you don't join a union, who bargains on your behalf? It's just individuals, but an individual nurse, an individual teacher, an individual clerical worker, an individual worker in the private sector can't bargain with the same power for rights at work that a union can. So collectivization, collective action makes the individual stronger because they band together.
Well, I think that's the point I'm making, really. There isn't, the reason why people join, obviously, is because there doesn't seem to be another alternative. Do you think that they are taking advantage of their position of power by utilising really important moments and making it difficult for people, a bit like Insulate Britain?
Oh, come on. The rail unions are turning on Grant Shapps. He wants to nationalise the unions. He gets the responsibility of dealing with the pay. You can't have it both ways. He wants Great British Railways. He wants to say he's in charge of the railways. Well, he is in charge. So therefore, he's taken workers in the private sector where they were perfectly capable of bargaining with employers. Now he wants to bargain with them. He wants to give the railway workers the same 1.5% pay deal he's offering to teachers and to nurses and civil servants. Well, he's getting his comeuppance. He's in charge. He's going to have to take this.
I think what he's saying is that if the unions want to strike, they can do that, but the service must still continue to run, so that there'll be a minimal level of cover.
That's just ridiculous.
Why is that ridiculous?
Because if people go on strike, they have the right to withdraw their labour. And he actually could just say, why doesn't everybody work from home? I mean, the problem is the government's internal contradiction. The people who use trains are middle class. They can work from home. You don't need to go to this ridiculous extent of removing people's basic civil right, the right to withdraw their labour, by bringing in laws to force people to go to work when they voted to go on strike. I mean, things are topsy-turvy now. It's a Conservative government who theoretically are meant to be in favour of freedom and liberty, and they're saying there's a fundamental liberty, the right to organise, the right to self-organise, the right to be in a trade union, the right to withdraw your labour, and he's saying you can't have that. I'm going to use the powers of Parliament and my majority to take away basic liberty. That's not Conservative. That's not at all Conservative. And it's ludicrous to see a Conservative who's nationalised an industry trying to now take away people's liberties.
John, can I ask you? John, can I ask you just briefly, because I've got to move on. Yeah. Do the police have a right to strike?
Well, the police gave away their right to strike after the 1919 Liverpool strike. It was a major moment in British history, and they've given it away. They've got a strong trade union, and they bargain. They've never indicated any time since 1919 they wanted the right to strike. So,
so all I'm saying is that there may be a negotiation where you could still continue running the service, but still be able to protest and show your displeasure with the situation you're in. But John, thank you so much for your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. But railways aren't used by very many people. Half the country only use the railway once a year. So we don't live in the 19th century.
Or wouldn't that make it worse than if they keep striking, then people might not want to use them at all? You know, they could end up doing more harm than good. But John, thank you so much for your thoughts. I've just got to move on, but I appreciate you coming on and telling me from your perspective. That's John McTurnham. He's a political strategist and former director of political operations to Tony Blair. Well, let's have a chat with Conservative MP for Buckingham and the member of Transport Select Committee, Greg Smith. Greg, thank you so much for being part of the show. Now, at a time when the economy is obviously trying to get back on its feet, what do you make of this proposed rail strike?
I think anyone that's seeking to bring the country to its knees, to bring Britain to a standstill, is committing a massive act of self-harm. Because if you shut down the ability of people to get to work, well, if you drive a train and you've gone on strike and you've stopped others getting to work, then there isn't going to be any money either through ticket fares or taxpayer subsidy to carry on with those railways, and people will lose their jobs themselves. Have trade unions had their day? No, of course they haven't. It's a perfectly reasonable thing for people to join a union, to bargain, to negotiate with management on wages and conditions and so on. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But there has got to be some balance to that. And those that seek to bring the nation to a standstill by taking away the core method of transport, certainly that my constituents that work in London use on a daily basis, that's just bringing economic harm, and the government needs to balance off against that.
Well, are they right then, in your view, to consider reducing the rights to strike, or obviously keeping the right to strike, but ensuring that the service continues to run?
No, absolutely. I think the government's suggestion is fundamentally a good one, because railways are key, critical national infrastructure. They are the means by which people get to work in many, many areas, especially the London commuter belt. And so ensuring that services still do run, even if those services are potentially a little bit more miserable than usual, a little bit more standing, no chance of getting a seat, no chance of getting any work done, at least if we're still guaranteeing a base minimum where people can get into the office, that's got to be good for balancing everybody's interests and keeping the economy afloat.
Well, Greg, finally, what about the argument that, the strike won't have any impact then, if that is the case? Because if everything's going on as normal, then the people who are striking, as the previous John suggested, was that actually you're removing people's rights to withdraw their labour.
As I say, I think this is a balancing act. Strikes will still be able to take place, but core services still be up and running. Now, I think the fundamental question is, are unions doing a good enough job of negotiating on behalf of their members? Are people actually wasting their money on union fees in the first place if the net result is that the unions haven't been able to negotiate either with the government or with private employers and come to a satisfactory conclusion for everyone? A strike is a pretty extreme action. It is pressing the nuclear button in many respects. And so actually I would say strikes are a failure of the unions to actually stand up for their members.